Well, good morning, actually. Yeah, it is still morning, or at least for us here in California. This is the Friday Hangout. Welcome to the Friday Hangout, the show where we talk about digital marketing news we found interesting this week and hang out with experts we find fascinating. Today, we have the wonderful Michele Price, Prosperity Gal on Twitter. And just before I tie in Michelle and let her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself and get on the conversations of brands needing smarter conversations. Hello, Janet. How are you doing?
I'm doing great this morning.
You're doing great. And Steve, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic now with you guys.
No tone of sarcasm at all in that, huh? You know, that's real.
I scared the heck out of him with the Texas talk earlier.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So, Steve, it was great seeing you yesterday, and we're gonna all actually be having a little fun this next week at a Cisco event together, huh? All three of us.
Cisco Live.
Cisco Live, rock on.
Hanging out with John Chambers.
Buddy John.
Yeah. And so we're heading to that event as part of their influencer program. And again, I don't know how they picked us Yahoos, at least myself. And
I'm sorry, Adam. What program was that again?
And the
Yahoos program.
The Yahoos, yeah, the Cisco Yahoos Google program, I think we'll have some fun over there. They're going to be talking about the Internet of Things, which is something.
Shout out to Brian Kramer. He's been a past guest too for that.
Who was it again?
Brian Kramer.
That's true. Yeah, he put that program together and invited us over. So, but without further ado, Michele. Tell us a little bit about you. Who are you, and what do you do?
Well, if you haven't already discovered from the snarky comment at the beginning, I am a Texan, so I open my global business radio show by saying, this is Michele Price here, coming to you from the third coast of Houston, Texas. And you know, it's interesting, having been an entrepreneur for 30 years, and it almost scares me to say that out loud, because then people go, how old are you? I have watched a lot change in business, And because Houston is the seat for energy, medical care, and space, it's been kind of interesting watching conservative businesses get handed their behinds because they choose not to move forward as quick as they should, as quick as customers or their clients expect them to. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are really being taken aback by now, is the fact that customers aren't patient anymore. They expect you to be there, and you're either there or you're not, and if you're not, boom, they're gone.
Well, let me ask you on that note. And by the way, if anybody is watching live, of course, you can go ahead and send out some questions to us on Twitter using the hashtag Friday Hangout. As usual, we have the video on Google Plus and on the FridayHangout.com, and you can. I don't know, Janet, did we have the questions set up so they can ask questions if they want as well?
They can ask questions on YouTube or within the Hangout itself, or send them to Twitter with the hashtag Friday Hangout.
Awesome. So we'd love to have you part of the conversation. So Michele, on the topic you were talking about, so like you said, you've been part of the business world for some time. If we sort of go back to the last, decade or maybe closer to when you first started, how were people? How were customers different then than they are now? Just to quickly set the tone for then, what's the evolution been? But what is it that people are adjusting to? Why do they have to adjust? How was it back then, and what were businesses accustomed to doing?
You know, to be pretty frank, customers were a whole lot more patient. They didn't have knowledge at their fingertips that they do now that we have Google and we can search for everything. They were more trusting, and now they walk in like a prepared interviewer, and if you aren't able to keep up with their rapid pace of questions, they find you irrelevant pretty quick. The other thing that's kind of fascinating and interesting to me is how it's shifted to where it's really important for you to have a business audience now. It's not just sufficient to have an email list. It's not cutting it to only talk to your customers on the phone anymore. And I'm the first one to hold my hand up, and I do this during the radio show all the time. I go, I'm going to hold my hand up in transparency. If I want to ask you a quick question and I can't do it on Twitter, I find someone else to do business with.
What?
So,
Go ahead, Janet.
well, so can you expand on what that kind of business presence means? You know, there's so many different ways, but that kind of business list, what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things that I found really interesting, recently I was hired by a company in the medical center here in Houston because they do a lot of medical trials, and they've had to reevaluate how they reach the patients for their medical trials. And a big part of that challenge is they used to do what almost every other business has done in the past. They used to be able to put an ad in the paper, and a lot of people would show up. And then they started trying to do more things with email, and you know, they've got people to show up, but it's becoming more difficult now to actually capture the attention of the people they need to pull in, and it's gotten more difficult to be able to talk in a way where you are going to be on their radar, because it's like you're talking directly to them even though you're talking to a larger audience. And a part of that is because people don't recognize how important it is to have an online presence. A lot of the more traditional industries have tried to use what I call fear-based and limiting-based parameters to keep them from being there, going, well, we really can't be there because, you know, we're bound by HIPAA, or we're bound by, you know, SEC, or we're bound by this, that, and the other. And they've really used it as a hurdle to not even investigate.
Those regulated industries.
A hurdle or an excuse?
Well, it's both.
Well, it's interesting. You know, you bring up such a great point, Michelle. You know, when I first started doing, you know, I've been in communications for a lot of years, and I have to say that when I moved to more kind of digitally leaning stuff as kind of my sole business, which probably was like 6 years ago or something like that. At that point, there's still this kind of missionary thing where a lot of people in some business, you know, missionary stuff where people are like, say, oh, you know, I don't know, what's the ROI on that? It's like, I don't know, what's your ROI on your phone? You know, it's like this type of discussion. And I have to say now, my clients fall, because I do content marketing for demand generation, and my customers kind of fall into two groups now, and God bless all of them. But you know, they tend to be either fairly sophisticated because they understand the role of content marketing within the marketing mix, and how important that is just for, you know, for things, or they haven't done anything and they're just in absolute agony and pain watching their competitors eat their lunch.
Go ahead, Michelle. No, you go ahead.
I totally agree, because one of the things that I find fascinating about that is when you lead with your limiting beliefs, your challenges, your problems, or your fears, then you end up asking the wrong questions. And it's one of the things. You
set yourself up, right? I mean, you're setting yourself up.
You have to be the same savvy business person on the receiving side as you are on the giving side. So, for example, what I mean by that, as a consumer, they all use the tools. As a consumer, they Google things, they look stuff up, they go and they look at reviews. I mean, they use everything that's available to them as a consumer.
And they seem to be blind when it comes to how their consumers find them.
But when it comes to them having to sit on the other side of that scenario, and now they're the one selling and someone else is the consumer, that's when they go, well, but we just can't do that. I'm like, yeah, you can. And it's funny when you get in a room full of stakeholders and you've got markers and a dry board eraser and you start asking tough questions and you start mind mapping things out, all of a sudden they have an opportunity to see where they are being their biggest problem. All of a sudden they see where their own biases are. And as a communication strategist and a marketer nowadays, we have to be willing to have really tough conversations with our clients. A lot of colleagues have asked me, they're like, you tend to be rather frank and forward with people, even on the radio show. Do you do that when you're trying to build your business? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to work with people who lie to themselves.
But
Well,
that's,
because right now, I mean, I'm so glad to hear you say that, Michelle. I mean, like, I think one of the problems is, like, I still, I deal with people, still, again, people who haven't maybe, they're in an industry that's been a little more technology proof, which is almost none now. But they have this. There's still this kind of belief that there's this unlimited flow of leads. They can just, if they're willing to pay more money to turn that tap up, the leads that are ready to close will poop out. And it's like this unlimited universe of leads. And it just doesn't work that way. And so it's like, to your point, is like, Michelle, it's like, if you don't say, listen, I understand that would be nice, but throwing money at advertising, all the things that you used to do, doesn't work anymore. Things are different. So let's just tell you how that's going to happen. And it's going to mean that you have to be involved in the sales process a lot earlier now, because 50 or 70% of people, I mean, the majority of people who raise their hand and talk to you are 50 to 75% through the sales process already. And if you're not there to answer questions earlier in that sales funnel, your competitor is, and you're going to just lose everything. And lying to people, like you said, is this: you can't put up with that ignorance. You have to kind of like, listen, I love you, but here's some tough love.
well, and in that case, we're really talking from sort of the consultants or getting hired, right, to work with a company. If the company knew exactly what to do, most cases they would take care of it. In most cases, I mean, in some cases it may be a matter of resources. They don't have a person in place.
I'm going to disagree with you.
Really?
You want me to tell you why?
Yes.
Because when you're inside that jar, you don't see things the same way as a third-party person who's not attached to your objectives and your outcomes, and they're not involved in all the political processes inside your business. They don't walk in with any of the biases that you use to color your own world. I uncovered a couple of biases last week with a client, and they're like, oh my God, this is affecting how we actually get people to close. And I'm like, yep.
Well, and I think that we're in agreement on that. I think that I was saying if they didn't have those biases and weren't in that bubble, and they suddenly discovered the clarity of that question, then the clarity of wait, we see these blockages themselves, they take care of it, but in most cases they don't. That's why I think that we need to be these internal sort of advocates and be frank about what we see and what we spot to help move things forward a little bit. I actually really relish that opportunity with working with my clients. You feel like you're a little bit of a change maker in some cases, but I want to jump back on our topic a little bit more even. So we said, brands need smarter conversations. So we talked about some of the obstacles that brands have in sort of getting in that mental mode about the need for conversations, or really that conversations are the lead into. I've used this term a lot, and I've seen some people get a little turned off by it or whatever, and I don't see any reason why. But you need to dig a well if you need, but before you want water, you can't just suddenly want an audience and then go guess what we want to do. We want to do a marketing campaign right now. Well, guess what? You haven't spent any time trying to build your audience yet, so you're releasing this campaign. You're engaging with a community that doesn't exist yet, and creating this community and creating an audience is an ongoing process that should start the second that you suddenly wake up and decide that this is what you want to do, so that you have an ongoing. Your audience continues to grow because you've got this ongoing steady drumbeat of engagement and activity with them. And then when you need to reach out to them, it's like a relative, right? That one relative that only calls when they need something. You don't want to be the brand that only decides to knock on somebody's door or tweet them or whatever when you're the one that needs something. What do you think of that, Michelle?
Well, you're not going to get a response from them if that's the process and the attitude and the mindset that you take, because there's no trust in that type of relationship. And it's probably one of the one of the more frustrating things that I have to try to explain to companies, especially more corporate style companies, is they feel like, you know, their customers have always been there, and I'm like, you might want to start looking at some big brands that have had to close their doors who had that same attitude. I don't care if you've been in business for 100 or 40 or, you know, whatever years. We've seen how quick people can turn on a brand and how they can rally their colleagues and their friends and their community around it, because the individual and the consumer has been quiet for so long, and now they you know, we talked about this 5 years ago about how they had a voice now, and a lot of businesses kind of ignored us, and then some of them got on the bandwagon and they tried to leverage it and just use it. But smart businesses and brands have started thinking about how can we cohabitate in that space with them, how can we collaborate, how can we be more of a beehive mindset, and that is where trust is built now. You really, you have to think like a millennial now. You can't think like a traditionalist or even a boomer anymore. And I used to try to figure out why is it that I found it so easy to work with younger people, and I started looking at the statistics around what we're learning about millennials, and I identified with almost every one of them. And I was like, oh, okay, so I was a millennial who was born during boomer times. I got really frustrated trying to bring people along. For example, one of the mottos that I've always had for a very long time is, I want to make a difference as well as a profit. Now, you can imagine the kind of comments I got back in the 70s and the 80s with that kind of mindset. People like, well, we don't worry about making a difference. That's what missionaries are for. Except, look what's leading now. Look who people are making choices about who they're going to do business with and where they're going to spend their dollars.
I was intrigued in terms of like looking to build those smarter conversations with brands. I was intrigued about, you mentioned using mind mapping, and I'm curious if you use that as a process to help identify where the opportunities are to develop conversations. Is that how you use it?
I use it in multiple ways. I use it in discovery. I use it to help develop who the personas are and who their customers are, and help them really identify whether or not they all have the same values that they used to identify with. I mean, we uncover a lot. We use the mind map in creating out their action plan as well, because what I've learned being so involved in neuroscience and personal development for a really long time, that was just that's one of the things that I just enjoy personally in it, and I've started seeing how it waves over into the business world, is that because I understood a long time ago, before we started talking about how the brain operates from a visual perspective more, whenever I operate from that way with clients, what happens is they get it faster because they can see it. They can see the details, they can see the data, as well as the big picture and the small things that have to happen.
Can you actually? I'm having used mind maps in the past. I know how I use it to actually plan out action items. But when you do the buyer persona, can you talk a little about what that looks like and some of the questions that you use to kind of kick off that process?
I'm trying to think about a recent conversation I had last week, and I'm just double checking in my head what I can and can't say. So one of the things is we will map out who is it that used to respond, and then we'll go on the other side of the board and we'll talk about now who is actually your ideal consumer for this. And we'll write out all of the different, and I won't let them get away with just giving me, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have to have at least 20 or 30. And then I have them look at the difference between what they used to have and what their ideal is, and we start looking for where's the gaps. And then we start looking at now who has come in recently, and we start identifying what kind of qualities and values they have, and we start talking about Where are they active now? What's changed for them? Why did they show up versus, before they didn't show up? I mean, it's just literally hitting them with a myriad of questions. And what ends up happening in that process is it lowers that barrier that they have in their mind about how, well, we know what we need to do. We just need you to tell us how to do it in a new way, so that they have more of a beginner's mind again. They're willing to ask themselves those tougher questions, and what happens is they start giving me different responses, and by the time we get to the end of the session, they go, wow, I had no idea we had these biases, or wow, I had no idea we were that far off from where we thought we were. And people walk out of the door going, I feel like we've got a much better handle on what the heck we're supposed to be doing.
Hey, Janet, I see that we have a question from the audience, and it's from one of our favorite viewers and a friend of mine, Luke Covey. In fact, I happen to think I've got a pretty good vocabulary, but I had to Google this one. Can you even pronounce the word that he said?
So the question is, have you ever fired a recalcitrant client?
Recalcitrant. Wow, I don't even know if I've ever heard that.
All right, somebody give me the definition of.
All right, recalcitrant. It's a calcium supplement. No, wait, not a calcium supplement. Let's see. It means having an obstinately uncooperative attitude toward authority or discipline. Pretty much a description of Steve, or a person with an pretty much the same definition. Steve, come on, don't be surprised.
Basically,
uncooperative and doesn't like the fact that you're you're sort of dropping some knowledge and honesty on them, and they don't want to be cooperative. They want to do the same thing.
I actually use some of that in the process when we're getting to know each other, so that I don't even sign a contract with people who are a pain in the ass.
Good for you.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I have there's a lot of downsides to being a consultant, and because you work sometimes for rough hours, you got to go to your own business dev, and you work and all that kind of stuff. One of the things is what you do is like, I know within the first few conversations if there's a love match here. And if
because you can ask questions and you can uncover is what they're sharing with you right now just because they're embarrassed or they're frustrated or they have a lack of understanding or knowledge of where they need to go. You can kind of get past some of that to uncover whether or not they actually just stand in their way all the time.
Yeah, if somebody, for me, for me, one of the tip-offs is if somebody starts, if they tell me, normally people aren't clear about goals, and one of the big thing I do at the beginning of a relationship is clear, because they come to me and they ask for tools. We want X, Y, Z, and I go,
want a Facebook.
Or whatever, and so I go, well, why is it you want that? And they go, because we want more viewers. I was like, well, why do you want more viewers? And as we kind of dig in the process, I go, okay, so if you want, what they want is have more leads in the pipeline, some flavor. And once we kind of identify what that really looks like, if I start saying, okay, well, here's what we need to do, and they start telling me, no, we want to do it this other way. It's like, well, hold on, you want to tell me how to do my job, and you want to have me do it your way and have me fail. And it's like, I'm not going to sign up for that. I can either do it right for you, or you can find somebody else.
Sometimes you can have those conversations in a way where you lead with who your ideal client is. You can lead the conversation with saying, well, what I've learned and my experience has shown me is the people who get the best results are, and then you give what those qualities look like.
I just say, don't be so recalcitrant. That's all I say. Man, I can't believe that I said that, and I said it correctly. Actually,
no, actually,
you pronounced it well.
Did I not say it right?
No, you said it right. But the bottom line is that if you're going to spin your wheels and you don't really have time to convince them about how they need to market, if it's not a good fit, then they need to find somebody else. Because time and time again we do that and go, oh,
you want to be a real smart aleck, but do it in a more polite way, like some of us Southern people can do. We can do it in a polite way. Is go, my results sort of speak for themselves. Do you want to be able to get the attention inside of a conference where there's 10,000 people? If you're exhibiting there, then what were your results last year and how many sales did you make from it? I mean, I make them kind of produce some data to me beforehand.
And most
the awesome thing about having data, right? Is now we have so many data points we can just simply go, let me take a look. And I mean, I did that recently with a client who was telling me how incredible their SEO was, and I was like, okay, let's go ahead, let's do some searches. Let's take a look at code.
Just look.
Let's look at things, and they were and part of it is you know, they look at a couple places, and well, bottom line is you know, and then they look and go, oh wow, that's not what that wasn't the picture in my mind. Now that we're looking at it, it's reality. It's like having a preconceived notion until you finally pull that book out or watch that movie again, right? That movie was great when we were a kid, and then you watch it now, and nostalgia, I forgot what they called it, nostalgia is like remembering something is way cooler than it is when you actually go back and watch it again.
Well, you're a different person than when you watched it later, so of course you're going to have a different experience.
Yeah,
we need to take them out of their box every once in a while, because they're so embedded in what they do that, you know, they don't see it, and that's one of the reasons to bring in somebody else.
Hey, Michelle.
Well, to help them get a better understanding of what their expectations are, whether they're realistic or not, too.
Well, you know, Michelle, we want to make sure that we give the audience some good examples, and not so, you know, we've talked about some of the obstacles and things like that, and I think you get brought to the forefront a couple good things to think about. Before we move on to our next segment, is there any sort of examples of folks out there that are getting it right? They are having the right conversations or engaging with folks correctly and understand what it means to build a community and audience. Anybody that stands out to you?
Ford.
And why do you think that? What have you been?
Because they've taken a really different approach. Even though people see them doing a lot of social media, if you will take the time to look at how they go about just crafting their campaigns, and they are pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? They're really ahead of what a lot of people are doing in the space. Most people jump into the social media space and they just use the channels as a bullhorn instead of recognizing that the power and the value is to actually have other people talking about you. And they've done a great job of building ambassadors because they're willing to do things other card manufacturers aren't willing to do. They give, for example, it's easier to speak about myself. They give me a car and they say, we want to do a campaign around this, and so I'll go, well, I'm going to talk about this from a women business owner's perspective, and I'll drive multiple cars, and I talk about, well, this is what my business life was like when I drove this vehicle, and here's how it was different, either good or bad, when I drove this vehicle, and this is what it was like when I drove this vehicle. These are the things I have to deal with on a daily basis. They're just much more open-minded, yet they always make sure that it aligns to whatever their business objectives are for the year. I think it's almost an unfair comparison, because I don't know very many brands that I can go to and say, what are you trying to accomplish this year? You know, what are you trying to sell, but as well as what's your message that you're trying to accomplish this year, get people to understand. And then I'm always thinking like a marketer about how can we connect people's hearts and minds to that message. I don't see a lot of brands even going that way. The other thing that I find really fascinating about them is as we drive their vehicles, we will tell them, you know, next year when you do this, this was a bad spot. You moved it 2 inches, something, it doesn't work for me, or you can't put a drink in there because then when you have to shift, like on the Mustang, then when you have to shift the gear, it actually hits the drink, it spilled out, you know, and then the next year they fixed it.
You know, I'd like to go on record saying that if Ford wants to send me a Mustang, I'll tell them anything they want to know.
Well, and so Michelle, we want you obviously to stick around. This is the where we go on to segment 2 and we talk about some things that we notice, some stories, some things we want to share this week, and then also be able to find out where people can find you online in just a moment. You'll stick around with us?
Sure.
Awesome. So let's see. So Janet, you had I think we all sort of have maybe a little bit different shares than the usual for the week, and I think they're all good ones and differing ones. Janet, what is your share this week? We got a chance to take a look before the show.
Well, my share was really a story that showed up in the New York Times. Barbara Walters is finally retiring, and she's had tons and tons of amazing spots with, thought leaders from around the world. And one of the things that they pointed out in the New York Times, which it's interesting that it was in the New York Times too, but how media has changed. Back in the days when she did some of her interviews, the whole world would stop to listen to Barbara Walters. And, when she did a lot of interviews, the Monica Lewinsky is one of the ones that she got the most traffic for. But these days, those kind of big media hits aren't really making as much of a hit as they used to. It's changed from 50 million viewers to hundreds of thousands of viewers tuning in to watch those shows. And now it's shifting to the media.
Why do you think that is, Janet?
I'm sorry?
Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I think that we are looking for much more immediate news. I have a client that got major news on both NBC and CNN in the period of 2 weeks. They actually flew around the world to do a story on these people. The traffic to the website was not impacted. But when one major celebrity shared something on Twitter, bang, they got tons of subscribers. They got lots of traffic to the website. And we're just seeing that new media, as we called it in, the 90s, really has a different impact now than some of the traditional media channels.
Yeah,
Don't you think that all falls down into trust, though? We talked about that a little earlier with millennials and who they pay attention to and who they trust now.
I think it's not Barbara Walters. Is that what you're saying?
I think it goes beyond that. I mean, I would say, yeah, sure, that's part of it. But I think that people who are engaged more. I mean, like the Jimmy Fallons and I think the other guy, but a lot of these, these folks who've been tapped to take over kind of the leading roles and late night television. They get big contracts based really on how socially engaged they are. Because people who are socially engaged tend to be with other people who are socially engaged, and that's why I think somebody who's got a big Twitter account because they're doing a lot of stuff are going to have people who's willing to share more things and then drive more online people.
Do you think it also has to do as well with, and Steve, I mean, this is part of the topic that you've been talking about, not on the show, but on other conversations we've had. Do you think that it has to do with how those how viewership of that content or consumption of that particular piece of content is viewed in comparison to those who, for instance, wait for it to socially rise up? It's on the air, and then suddenly there's a discussion that happens, and then continued viewership or readership trickles in on a particular piece of content because of the action happening around the web, the discussion around the web about it. So instead of just everybody watching Monica Lewinsky all at the same time, nobody went to Netflix. Nobody had Netflix to keep their brain occupied on something else, and you couldn't go watch that clip on YouTube afterward. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you had to watch it right then and there, and all of the activity was concentrated during that time. And now it's scattered all over the place, and we're looking at Twitter and Facebook trending topics and stuff. You know what I mean? And seeing what's being talked about the most in these different channels.
But I think the big difference is whenever someone's got a Twitter following that they're highly engaged with them, everybody gets to be part of the conversation. When Barbara, and I loved her interviews, she had some pretty good interviews, but when Barbara has an interview, the only person who's part of the conversation is Barbara and the interviewee.
So I want, Steve, I think what you've got is really important, and I want to sort of end off with it because I want it to stick in people's heads. So I'm going to dive in with my share real quick. This was something I found interesting. I think I mentioned before that usually every day at the end of the day I go to my Apple TV and I watch, like, essentially they've got the queue of the top, say, 20 or 25 most viewed videos of the day, and it gives me sort of a flavor of what people think is important. Sometimes it's pop culture stuff, sometimes it's science, sometimes it's news, sometimes it's just entertainment.
What do you do?
Cats chasing dogs. Oh, sorry.
Is that a YouTube list? 'Cause I was.
It's a YouTube app, and when you go there, they have a bunch of different ways that you can dive in. You can search for a video. You can see, like, the highest rated or most views, which never changes because it's always, you know, Charlie bit my finger or something like that. But the which is the total truth. In fact, it's like the top 2 videos or something like that. When you go in there, you'll get the top 25 for the week or for the day, which are usually very close to each other. But bottom line is I found a video that was a video from a very popular brand. It was A1 steak sauce.
I love that.
And I think this is an incredible example of modern storytelling, connecting with the right audience, and then an incredible example of announcing a rebranding. So just to quickly sort of mention it, A1, I love A1. It's been a long time thing you think about having at steakhouses, right? And you know, so Janet, you can have your Mustang. I'll just get a case of A1. I'll be all good. And so basically, it's called A1 sauce, new friend requests, and you see the whole thing sort of told almost from that Google commercial thing where people are typing and then things are happening on the screen and people are interacting with each other. But this whole thing is basically like they're interacting on Facebook, and it's A1 basically talking to a few folks, and he's inviting friends to this party, to this party he's going to have, this dinner party, and I forgot what the reason is, but there's something going on with steak. Steak just isn't happy.
Steak got his feelings hurt because pork and salmon and everybody else was making friends with A1.
That's what it is, and so you know they use all these different elements of Facebook to sort of show this conversation happening between all of these different foods and salmon and pork and fish and A1 and the relationship that steak has, saying, you know,
these are all friend requests coming in.
Exactly.
It's a brilliant piece.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and so
watching for sure.
Yes, definitely, and we'll have that in our show notes, and also, and so it wraps up in the end with having this great party, this dinner party, and sort of announcing this rebrand that A1 is not just for steak. It's not the A1 steak sauce anymore. And so they had a life event. The life event, you know, is usually a marriage or a new job, and his life event is a new label. And the new label now just simply says A1 sauce. And what was that?
Original sauce.
Original sauce. That's what it was. And so the interesting thing is they continue to be tied to the legacy of A1 as this really popular, great sauce from way back in the day, but then now sort of opening it up in the way that, in my mind, Sriracha is kind of become the sauce that everybody wants to put on everything. And so, anyways, it's
definitely worth watching. I think what's really clever about it is why it could be very. Because it's about this relationship between steak and A1 and these other friend requests and that kind of stuff.
You actually feel kind of sorry for A1.
And steak, actually.
I'm sorry for steak.
Steak is, yeah. But what made it work is you see their interactions on this Facebook account. What really makes it work is that they don't take it seriously. It's definitely tongue-in-cheek. And Lou Hoffman, who was on a few weeks ago, talked about the difference between being funny and levity, or hilarious and being levity. And his point was that, you know, we can all share a little levity and kind of good nature. We don't all have to be hysterical, and which is a really high bar to set. You know, we're not going to be funny and die Will Ferrell. And you know, but this thing is, it shows levity. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There are a couple kind of in jokes around. Like one of the times, the first friend request it gets from, I forgot what the first pork. Yeah, you get friend request, and the cursor kind of hovers between confirm or reject or ignore. And it's just really cute stuff like that. And so it's a clever way, a clever storytelling in this form. And it's worth watching.
You got to do the heart and head.
Yeah.
You have to go. By the way, if you look at it, go to the actual YouTube page and look at some of the conversations, the comments happening, because those are, you know, incredible. Folks saying this is sadder than The Notebook, and that steak was spotted with his fallback chick ketchup. Anyways, a lot of really good stuff in there.
As usual with social, it's all about the comments.
And the link will be on our website.
Yeah.
So Steve, good stuff. I want you to share your share there.
So Friday, they took a vote, the FCC, 2-3 to adopt these new rules, and the new rules leave open this basically this fast laning, which in really short, this is net neutrality, and the really short version is basically ISPs because want to basically charge not for delivering things faster, but not to penalize certain things and make you pay more money, so they don't hold off and slow your traffic down. So it's just a move for money. It's really unfortunate. They passed this thing. The current FCC chair is a former cable guy, and it's just the American public has really been damaged in this. So we're going to share a link to FCC government/comments, and again, it's going to be on our website, but you can go to fcc.gov/comments. And you'll see the recent rulings in the very top. You'll see one of the top one, and I really encourage you to go and say whatever you want. You have to say who you are and for your comment to show up. But you want to go and you want to say, listen, I want a free internet. I don't want fast laning. This is not right. And this is how we're going to. I mean, there's a petition too for Obama. I think that this is probably the most powerful thing you do is go to the FCC, leave a comment, contact your local representatives, and send them a note. Please, this is really important to me. I don't want this. I want an open internet. Right now, we have a closed internet, or we potentially have a closed internet coming up on us, which is really unfortunate. So please, fcc.gov/comments.
I think it's really important that people understand that this isn't about Netflix. It isn't just about the broadband communication that is being sucked down by Apple TV, which Adam and I both use, and I've seen throttling on my bandwidth quite often, where basically you get the spinning beach ball of death because it's not loading.
And that means that the internet that you're paying for, that you've already paid for, is being intentionally slowed down to have your experience work. Something you've already paid for. It's like being mailed a letter that they hope.
You for not doing additional business with them. This is all started from the cable companies, and as much as I love Frank Galician, I'm glad he's not with Comcast anymore, because now I can talk about him honestly. And that is, because so many people have gotten off cable, and a lot of people use Comcast as their cable, they're trying to use this to punish people who've dropped cable.
Yeah. Well, and one of the best analogies I've seen just literally today in reading about it was it's akin to being on the freeway and then actually having like a fast pass or some sort of pass that you pay extra for in order to get into the fast lane.
But that's not even true. It's because they're not allowing you to go faster. They're just not slowing you down.
Yeah, they're not taking you in your fast pass and moving you to the right lane.
Yeah. Lane, you got to go around the traffic, and that's not what's happening. They're slowing everybody down. They're on the freeway doing a round robin, and they only let you pass, or they pay them extra.
One of the things I don't really understand about all this is why they think this is going to help us be a more competitive society, because so many other countries, they don't begin to pay what we pay right now without throttling for broadband.
Right.
I mean, it's all the communication.
They have faster, cheaper.
It's a
faster
longer
and cheaper.
Yeah. It's a longer conversation, but I mean the same thing with us being, I think, the only country that is locked into contracts when it comes to our cell phone coverage too.
The one thing is actually worth noting is that if you do if you go to fcc.gov/comments and leave a comment, you might want to ask them to make the internet a utility, which forces all the internet companies to they can't slow certain traffic down, and so they should be called utilities so they don't get a skate around that right now.
So Michelle, and thanks for that, Steve. And Steve, he's been sharing a lot of information on that on Facebook and such as well. So
Janet's helped me get that information to me. So thank you, Janet.
Cool. It's a very, very important topic. So Michelle, can you let us know where we can find you online if folks that want to check out what you're doing and stuff?
Well, besides my Twitter handle that's in front of me, @ProsperityGal, you can go find us at www.whoismichelleprice.com. And remember, My Michelle spelled with one L. There is no hell in my name.
But a lot of hell in the girl.
When I learned that from my mother,
my name.
I was learning how to spell Michelle. She says, "Daughter, there is no hell in your name."
And Steve, where can they find you?
You can find me at Steveology on Twitter and the Steveology blog.
Janet?
You can find me at jfouts on Twitter and pretty much everywhere else, or on my blog at janetfouts.com.
And I love your faces.
So I'm Adam Helway, so there's indeed a hell in my name, but it only has one L as well. So we're good there. And you can find me usually at Adam Helway or at Secret Sushi, at Secret Sushi Online, secretsushi.com. And we want to remind you, you can find the show if you aren't, of course, paying attention and watching this live, like some of you guys do, like Lou Covey does. We appreciate that, Lou.
Yay, Lou.
We especially love Lou's face. You can also find the recorded show after the fact. You can find the video on YouTube. You can find them actually archived as well on the FridayHangout.com. You can listen to the audio and subscribe to it on iHeartRadio and iTunes and Spreaker.com. Wherever it happens to be your choice. And until next Friday, 11-ish Pacific time, we thank you guys for listening and look forward to talking to you soon again. Thanks, Michelle.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.